You're listening to
Sound.
Insightful.
Bible teaching
for a meaningful
For a meaningful Christian walk.
Tonight we come to Isaac, sacrifice. But actually, I have a little burden not to speak so much from Isaac's perspective, but from Abraham's perspective. In these past few weeks, we've been covering the matter of God's covenant, right? And how God promised to Abraham concerning two things, right? Concerning the land and concerning his seed or his son that he would give to him. And Abraham, he wasn't as faithful as we make him out to be, and he needed something more than just a promise. So God covenanted to him, right? In Genesis 17, and we saw that with Abraham, he had these two choices set before him, and the two choices were, one was Sarah, and the other was Hagar. And we saw last week that these two women are an allegory. This is what Paul says in Galatians 4. He said these two women are an allegory for the two covenants, right? The covenant which is according to the law, fulfilled by the effort of man's flesh, and also the covenant according to grace, typified by Sarah, which is according to God's promise. And these two covenants we saw that these two covenants are before us today. Right? We have the same options that Abraham had as we continue to live our daily lives. Are we going to join ourselves to grace, to Sarah, or are we going to join ourselves to the law? Right? And we saw that these two joinings have two very different outcomes. Right? One of them produces Ishmael, and the other produces Isaac. And Ishmael, we saw, was not very positive. Right? He was a son of Abraham, undeniably, and actually Abraham loved Ishmael very much. If we read some of the first verses on the verse sheet, I'll just read Genesis 21:9-12. It says, "And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking Isaac. So she said to Abraham, 'Cast out this maidservant and her son, for the son of this maidservant shall not inherit with my son Isaac.' And verse 11 says, 'And the matter displeased Abraham greatly on account of his son.'" So you can see Abraham's heart there. He really loved Ishmael, right? But we saw that eventually Ishmael became a really big problem to the children of Israel, to God's chosen people, right? So whenever we join ourselves to the law and try to fulfill the law with our human effort, the result is always something that damages God's economy, something that damages what God is doing. That is a damage to his people. But whenever we join ourselves to grace, whenever we join ourselves to Sarah, to the Lord as grace, the result, the issue of that is Isaac. Right? So I think we were all very impressed that we want to be those who produce Isaacs and not Ishmaels. Right? So, kind of continuing on in Abraham's experience, which very much parallels our experience. This matter of casting out the maidservant and her son Ishmael displeased him greatly. And for us today, that's a lot of times our experience. We kind of treasure our ability to fulfill the law, our ability to be a good person apart from Christ, because it's good, But we have to be led, we have to grow and be led to the point where we can be satisfied with casting out all that comes out of our joining ourselves to the law, right? Even if it looks good, we have to be willing to cast it out, right? And this is very much a part of our daily experience. But we need to move on from just casting out the works of the law, anything that is produced from our joining ourselves to the law. Isaac was Abraham's only begotten son. And how about we read through Genesis 22, 1-6. Can I have all the guys read from 1-3 and all the girls read from 4-6 for me?
Now after these things God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." And And he said, Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. And Abraham rose early in the morning, and saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place of which God had told him.
On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. And Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go over there, and we will worship, and then we will return to you. And Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hands the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked together.
Yeah, so, as we read, there's a few things that kind of stand out to me. Isaac here is also a type of Christ. We see that he was Abraham's only begotten son, right? Even though Abraham technically had Ishmael, in God's eyes and consideration, and even eventually in Abraham's consideration, Isaac was his only son, whom you love. And this Isaac, he took the in verse 6, the wood which was going to be put on the altar was laid upon Isaac, right? And Isaac carried the wood from wherever they were to the place of the offering. And if you read the account in John 19 of the Lord's crucifixion, it says that Jesus bore his own cross. And this is very clear that, and the most clear to me is that, the Lord, Jehovah, he told Abraham to sacrifice an offer of Isaac in a specific place. He didn't just say, wherever you are, just set up the altar. But he pointed him to a mountain in Moriah. And it wasn't just a random place. The Lord, he was very specific in where he wanted Abraham to offer up Isaac. And, it took them 2 days to get there. And it was on the third day that Isaac was offered up. That's not a small coincidence, right? Just like the Lord was raised up on the third day. This is very much symbolic. Isaac is a type of Christ. And Abraham, for God to ask Abraham to offer up Isaac is very incredible, because God had promised to Abraham a seed, right, or a son, in whom all the nations would be blessed. And Abraham went through the whole, Eliezer, his servant, he told Jehovah, I'm going to be, my heir will be a servant, and then he complained to Jehovah. And then he went through Eliezer, he went through Ishmael, he had to cast him out. And now, finally, he got the promise, right? He got Isaac, through whom all the nations were to be blessed. And God now is asking Abraham to kill his son. Like, God, you just gave him to me. Yeah. This is the promise. You promised him to me. How could you ask me to kill him? But Abraham just, in Romans 4 and Hebrews 11, actually it brings out that in type, Isaac was dead, was brought to death, and was brought back to life on the third day. And this was because Abraham saw and knew and believed that God was a God of resurrection. If he didn't believe that God was a God of resurrection, then there was no way for him to freely and willingly offer up Isaac. And even Isaac, I was very impressed. He wasn't a baby when he was offered up. He was actually grown. He had been weaned already. He had grown. He could, walk and carry wood with him. Yeah. So he must have been grown to a certain extent. And Isaac submitted, right? He didn't fight against Abraham when he was being bound to the altar. Right. Abraham was willing to kill Isaac because he knew who God was. he was willing to offer up Isaac because he knew God was a God of resurrection. You know, so for us today, what does this mean? Right? What does it mean to offer up our Isaac as a burnt offering? Actually, this word burnt offering really impressed me. I don't think I ever really saw that Isaac was to be offered as a burnt offering. Now, that might not mean much to you, but this word burnt offering, you know, the first time it was mentioned is with Noah. And then later on, we see that all the offerings, actually this verse is listed towards the bottom in Leviticus 21:6. It shows us that Jehovah's offerings by fire are his food. It says, Jehovah's offerings by fire, the food of their God. You know, the burnt offering and all the offerings were for God's satisfaction. It's for God's enjoyment, his pleasure, right? When Abraham had received Isaac, that made Abraham very happy, right? He loved Isaac very much. He was satisfied. He got his son, which God had promised him. But God's need had not yet been met. And God's satisfaction was not yet achieved. And for this, God asked Abraham to offer up Isaac. And in doing so, this became a real satisfaction to the Lord. It became the Lord's food. All right, did you know you can feed God? You know, God, you know, that it just goes against our concept because, you know, like God doesn't need anything. He doesn't go hungry. But it says very clearly, you know, that the offerings by fire were God's food. You know, we can feed God by offering up our Isaac. Which begs the question, you know, what does that look like today in our experience? You know, if this is what will please the Lord, what will make him happy, what will satisfy him, how can I be like Abraham, one who offers up my Isaac? And there's several things. You know, first of all, an Isaac must be something given by God. It's not something produced by our doing, our ability, right? You know, here in Minnesota, we're very proud of being nice. We're very nice people. You know, we grew up trained to be nice. And, you know, that niceness is something that primarily comes out of our natural ability to be nice to people. You know, this is not something we can give to the Lord. This is an Ishmael. This is something we need to cast away. You know, but there are a lot of things that God has given us. Even from our human birth, there are certain talents or traits or virtues which the Lord has formed in us. These are things that we can offer up to the Lord. And even in our spiritual birth, you know, Isaac had to grow before he could be offered. And likewise, we also need to grow, right? And as we grow, we'll find that there are things that the Lord begins to ask to offer, for us to offer. Because, you know, these spiritual gifts, our spiritual function, you know, you may find in a few years, you know, you have a knack for taking care of people. You know, you just know how to take care of someone. You just know what they need. Or you may find that, you know, after a few years of growing in the Christian faith, that you have a way with expounding the word to people. Now, these are gifts given to you by the Lord through your spiritual birth. These are some of the things that the Lord may ask you to offer up to him. And because before we offer it up to him, it belongs to us, right? Because God gave it to us. So it's mine. And that means I can use it however I want. And ultimately, you know, it's kind of hard to trust ourselves to do the right things with what God has given us. Right? How many times have we done the right thing with what God has given us? Not too many times for me. You know, so eventually the Lord will touch us. What about this thing? You know, your ability to speak to people, your ability to care for people, your ability to, you know, read the Bible regularly. All these different things, your diligence, your whatever it may be. You know, these are all things that eventually the Lord will touch. And when he touches those things, what will strengthen us and motivate us to offer these things up to the Lord, to let go of what he's given us and offer it back, is for our knowing him as the God of resurrection. Right? And when we do give it back to the Lord inevitably, he will bring it back up in resurrection. So he may not, you may want to do so much with your gift. Maybe you're talented in musically. You play the guitar very well. And before, in the earlier stages of your life, you wanted to do so much for the Lord with this musical talent. You wanted to, start a band or record some music. And as you grow, maybe the Lord may touch that and ask you to give that to him. And it may be that when he gives it back to you, he doesn't want you to do any of the things that you wanted to do originally. But this is a price that we have to pay, right? But this is what satisfies God. This is what makes God happy, is when we're willing to give back to the Lord what he has given us. He gave it to us to begin with. So theoretically, we should have no problem giving it back to him. But, the way our human nature is, we like to hold on to these things. And one of the things that we really like to hold on to is our spiritual experiences of Christ. I remember the first time in college when I really felt constrained by the love of God. It was when I was showering. And I don't know why, I was just thinking about Christ's death in the shower, and I really got constrained. And it was a very strong experience, and even feeling there's some emotion involved, tears, which I couldn't tell because I was showering, but that was a spiritual experience that I held on to for a long time. That's a wonderful experience, right? Feeling the love of God and being constrained by his love. But because I enjoyed that experience so much, I kind of dwelt on it for a long time and wasn't willing to let go of it. And I just tried to recreate that experience again. Thankfully I kept showering, but it didn't happen in the shower again, and no matter how much I tried to recreate it, I tried to think through the same things that I was thinking in the shower. I tried to do it in the shower. No matter what I tried, I couldn't recreate that experience. And a lot of times, we just like to hold on to these experiences that we have, and we just don't let go. We're Lord, I just want to feel that way again, or experience that again. And I was helped eventually to see that I need to let this go. And there's a verse in Philippians 3:13 and 14, which describes Paul's experience of letting go and offering back to the Lord. And he says, "Brothers, I do not account of myself to have laid hold, but one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind and stretching forward to the things which are before, I pursue toward the goal for the prize to which God in Christ Jesus has called me upward." Paul was one who was the one thing he did was to forget the things which are behind and to press on and stretch forward to the things which are before. All these experiences of Christ, no matter how sweet and real they are, as long as we hold on to them, the Lord will not be able to give us something new. He may be wanting to give us this experience of him, that experience of him. He may be wanting to touch a certain part of our heart. But as long as we keep holding on to these past experiences, our hands are full and we're unable to receive anything new. So, Abraham's example is really, we really need to take heed to his example, right? He was willing to offer up, and we need to be willing to offer up all of our past experiences of Christ, knowing that when we let go of our experiences, he is faithful to bring us into new experiences of Christ. Maybe not the one that we quote unquote want, but the one that we need, right? The one that will satisfy him, that will ultimately cause us to grow cause his economy, his plan to advance. And this is God's heart for us. You know, as long as we hold on to our Isaacs, no matter whether it's, you know, our good attributes, whether it's our spiritual gifts, whether it's our experience of Christ, as long as we keep holding on, there's no way for the Lord to go forward, to move on with his plan, right? Because that'll either occupy us, or, you know, Isaac will be ours, right? God won't have a way to freely use that gift, whatever it is, you know, and everything that passes through death. The only thing that can pass through death and come back is resurrection life. You know, so a lot of these things there's a lot of impurities in our life, right? And all the things that we hold on to. But when we're willing to offer them as a burnt offering, you know, the burnt offering actually, it's the first offering mentioned in the book of Leviticus, which covers all the different offerings which the priest offered to God. And the burnt offering, all of the meat was burned and offered up to Jehovah. You know, a lot of the other offerings, part of it was reserved for the priest to eat. But the burnt offering was particular in that all of the meat and the fat was burned up for God's satisfaction, to be a satisfying fragrance to Jehovah. You know, so part of the significance of Isaac being sacrificed is not just a matter of obeying, which it definitely is, but it has God's satisfaction in view. You know, now that I've received Isaac, I've received a gift from God, I've received an experience of Christ, am I willing to let that go, to offer it back up to the Lord for his satisfaction? And if we are, then in Abraham's experience, he received Isaac back, right? God stopped him from killing Abraham. Oh, sorry, God stopped him from killing Isaac. And yeah, this is really not an easy experience to go through, because it is a loss initially. But if we see that God is a God of resurrection, you know, it really requires an unveiling. You know, we have to see and know our God as a God of resurrection, or else we won't be willing to let go. You know, the more time we spend with the Lord, the more we'll be strengthened, enlivened to let go of all the Isaacs in